Hey guys, in this video, we're going to learn about arrays. Now, what are arrays? Well, they're data structures that store elements that can be accessed using an index. You can think of them like boxes that are linked to the next, where each box stores one element. Now, this element could be a string, it could be a number, it could even be another object. So, before we understand arrays, let's take a look at what computer memory looks like. Well, you can think of computer memory like a grid, where each box has one address that uniquely identifies that memory location. And the addresses are often in chronological order. Now, each box in the grid stores one element, which could be a number, a string, or even an object. Usually, things in memory, however, are not stored sequentially. This means that the variable num1 may be stored at memory location 3, and variable num2 may be stored at memory location 9. However, in an array, which is like a collection of elements, everything is stored one after the other. For example, if I have an array of length 3, it means it has 3 elements in it. Let's assume the array is storing the strings A, B, and C. Now, the computer will find 3 consecutive boxes in the memory and allocate them for storing the array. So, if it tries storing it in memory location 1, 2, and 3, it won't work because memory location 3 is already occupied, and it needs 3 consecutive boxes. So, perhaps it would store it in 16, 17, and 18. And this would work. So remember, in arrays, the elements are not stored in random places, but rather one after the other. Now, why is this so crucial for arrays? Well, let's say we want to access the third element, which is C. And, well, the computer knows the address of the first element of the array, which is at memory location 16 in this case. So the computer is at memory location 16. Now, to go to the third element, it knows that the third element is 2 boxes ahead of the first element. So it can simply just add 2 to 16 and move to memory location 18. It doesn't have to go from memory location 16 to memory location 17 to memory location 18. It can go directly from 16 to 18. Now, if elements of arrays were not stored one after the other in memory, then the computer would have to go to the first element. So let's take a look at this example, where A is stored in memory location 16, B is stored in 4, and C is stored in 13. Now, these 3 letters are all part of an array, and what would happen is the computer would go to the first element, which is A, and now the first element would actually have a pointer to the next element. So the pointer would just basically point to the address of the next element. So in this case, it would point to 4. So then the computer would go to memory location 4. And then it would point to memory location 13. And it would go to 13. Now after it's taken 3 steps, it knows it's at the third element. So once it reaches the third element, it will be able to access what it is. Now, the reason that the last element of the array points to null is because it can't point to another memory location, so it just points to nothing. So null is kind of a void word. It just means that that's the end, there's nothing beyond it. So what's really important to remember about arrays, the beauty of arrays, let's say that, is that they allow direct access to elements, and these can be accessed by the index of the array. So this is not how arrays are stored, currently what you're seeing. Arrays are stored one after the other. So how do we declare an array? Well, let's say we have an array. We store it in a variable, first of all. So I've just called this variable R, and this is the array that I have. And it's important to remember that these elements will be stored one after the other in memory to allow faster data access. So, well, how do I find the third element? Well, each of these boxes have an index. So the first box will have index 0. The second box will have index 1. And the third box will have index 2. So if I want to ever find what's in the first box, I can just say R of 0, and that will return whatever is stored in the first box. So right now, this is just me saying that this line it's not code, it's just me saying that in the first box, the first letter is A. So similarly, you can do that for the second box and the third box. So one really important thing to remember is that indexing always starts from 0. It doesn't start from 1. So the third element's index would be 2, and the second element's index would be 1, and the first element's index would be 0. So now let's switch to Visual Studio Code to understand how to program by using arrays. So to declare a new empty array when all the elements are known, we just have to choose a name for the array. So let's say we want to call our array R. Then we use the equals to assignment operator, and next we represent the empty array with square brackets, like so. So empty brackets mean that the array is empty. So this right now is an empty array. But let's say I want to store the names of a few countries in the array. Well, I can go inside the brackets and type the name of the country. Well, let's say I want to type India first. So now the array has just one element in it, which is India. To add another element to it, I just have to put a comma after the first element, so a comma here, and then I can go ahead and type my second element. So let's say my second country that I want to type is USA. So now the array has two elements in it. So remember, commas are used to separate elements. If this was not there, then there's a big syntax error. So you need to have a comma after the element. Now, I can keep adding as many elements as I want to the array by separating them with commas. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll add two more. I will add Australia, and I will add Singapore. Okay, so this is my array, and it has a length of 4 because it has 4 elements in it. And to access perhaps the third element, I can type print R of 2. Now the reason that I don't say 3 inside the square brackets over here is because the index always starts from 0. So the first element has index 0, second element has index 1, third element has index 2, and so on and so forth. So remember, if you want to get the element in a specific place of an array, you need to type the name of the array, so in this case it's R. Then you need to type square brackets. And inside the square brackets, you need to put the index of the element you are trying to retrieve. And remember, there's no space between the array name and the square brackets. So this is wrong. There is no space. Now, if you choose an index out of range, so in this case greater than 3, then you will get an error. So when using indexes, you should be sure of the length of the array. So for example, if I were to write print array of 5, well, this line would give me an error because there is no index 5. There's only up till index 3, which is Singapore. So I need to be careful when using indexes. So in order to be sure of the length of an array, you can actually use the length function. And what the length function does is it returns the number of elements in the array. So to use this function, just type length, so print length, so len, open parentheses, and then the name of the array, so r. And then, of course, you have to close the parentheses. So basically, now let's go ahead and run this. And this should print Australia and then number 4. So if I run this, there you go, Australia and 4. So now I can also actually modify elements in the array by using the index. So let's say I want to change USA to United States of America. Well, I know that USA is at index 1. So I can use this index and type r of 1 equals United States of America. And now this statement, what it is doing is it is assigning the string United States of America to the array at index 1. So USA, the string USA, will be replaced by United States of America. So let's go ahead and print the output. So let's just say I want to print the entire array. Well, I can say print r. Now let's go ahead and run this. And there you go. It no longer says USA, even though I initialized it to USA, but rather it says United States of America. Now we know how to get the element at a certain place in an array and how to change an element in an array. But how do we add and remove elements from an array? Well, to add elements, we simply use the append function. So let's say I want to add the country Russia to my list of countries. Well, I would first type the array name, so r, followed by a full stop, and then the word append, followed by an open parentheses, and inside the parentheses, I will put whatever I want to append to the array. So in this case, it's the string Russia. Now if I print the array by typing print r again, Russia should be the last element of the array. So there you go, Russia has been added to the array. Now one important thing to understand about the append function is that you can only add elements to the end of the array. You cannot add an element in between other elements. So for example, if I wanted to add Canada using the append function, it would only come after Russia. I wouldn't be able to add it in between Singapore and Russia. If I want to add it in between elements, then I have to use the insert function. So in order to use the insert function, you have to type the name of the array, followed by a full stop, the word insert, and then parentheses. And inside the parentheses, the first thing you have to specify is the index that you want to insert the element at. So in this scenario, I want to insert it at index 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So I will put 4, comma, the actual element you want to insert. So I want to insert the string Canada. And this should insert the string Canada at the correct position. So let's go ahead and print the array, and let's see how that works out. And there you go. Canada has been inserted between Singapore and Russia. So just remember, appending is when you want to add to the end of the array, so you don't really care where the element is added in the array. But if you care about where it's added, then you need to use the insert function. Now, after adding Russia and Canada, maybe I want to remove Singapore. Well, then I use the remove function. I type the name of the array, so r, followed by a full stop, then the word remove, and parentheses. And then inside the parentheses, I have to put the exact element I want to remove. So in this case, I want to remove the element Singapore. And now if I go ahead and I print R, Singapore should no longer be a part of the array. And there you go. In the last array, which is the last print statement, the most updated version of the array, Singapore is not an element. So this is one method of removing elements from an array. But what if you don't know what the element is, but you know the index? You know that perhaps you want to remove Australia, which is at index 2. Well, then you can use the pop function. So for that, you have to type the name of the array, followed by a full stop, the word pop, and then parentheses. And inside the parentheses, you just need to put the index. So in this case, it's 2. Now if I go ahead and I print array, well, it should not have the third element. And there you go, it doesn't have Australia in it. So there are 2 ways of removing elements from arrays. One is to use the remove function, and the other is to use the pop function. And they both have their own scenarios of when to use them. So now let's open up a program that I wrote earlier. So in this program, what I am trying to do is get the names of different people from the user, and once the user is done inputting names, I want to sort the names that the user has inputted in ascending order and print them one at a time. So the easiest way to do this is by using an array. So what you can do is you can initialize an empty array, get all the inputs and append them to the array. Then you can sort the array and then print the output. Print the array. So the first part was obviously declaring an empty array. We saw how to do this earlier. We just typed the name of an array. So in this case, the array is called names. Then we typed an equals to sign and empty square brackets. Now after initializing my array, I started an infinite while loop, which will continue to get user inputted names and append them to the array names. But remember, with infinite loops, you need an exit condition. So first, over here, I got the input from the user and stored it in the variable name input. Then, if the name input was 0, it means that the user was done inputting names. So I provided the break statement where we were able to break out of the infinite loop. Now, if it's not 0, so if it's anything else, then we can add the name to the array. So how we did this is by using the append function, which we just learned, names, which is the name of the array, a full stop, the word append, and then parentheses, and inside the parentheses, the variable or the string or the integer that you want to append to the array. Now, the reason over here that I didn't type the number 0, but rather the string 0, is because the input function always returns a string. It doesn't return an integer or a float. So even if the person was to type 0 to finish, it would return the string 0 and not the integer 0. So after the user is done inputting names, I have added all of them to the array names. Now I will sort the array by using the sort function. So the sort function basically sorts all the elements of an array in ascending order. So to use it, you have to type the name of the array, so names, followed by a full stop, then the word sort, and empty parentheses. So what this function will do is it will sort all the elements in the array in ascending order. So after this line, the array is sorted, but I want to print each of the names one after the other. So I could, write print 0, and then, copy paste that and make this 1, and then copy paste that and make this 2, and so on and so forth. But the only issue is that I don't know the number of names that the user has inputted. It's up to them. They could have inputted 5, 100, 20, as many as they wanted. So this is a bad idea because eventually my index will be out of range. Rather, what we can do is get the number of elements in the array by using the length function. So over here, using the length function, and then I would use a for loop that runs in the range of the number of elements in the array. So that is what this line here is doing. Now inside the loop, I can use the variable I as my index. So I can write print names I. So whatever value I hold, it will print the element at the ith index. So for example, first I would be 0. So it would print names of 0. Then I would be 1 and it would print names of 1. And this would keep on going until we are 1 less than the length of the array, which is perfect because indexes are always 1 less than the actual length. So it's really as simple as that. So now if I go ahead and I run this program, so I click play, so enter a name. So I'm going to enter my name. Oops, wrong place. So I'm going to enter my name. And now I'm just going to make up a bunch of names. So Carlos, Amy, Mia, Bob. Now I only want to input 5 names, perhaps. So I will enter a 0 to finish. And there you go. The names have been sorted in order and have been printed line by line. So now another way that I could have done this last step, the 4th step of printing the names using the for loop, was by actually writing for name in names and then writing print name. Now what this will do is name, the variable name, will hold each element that is there in the array. So first it will hold Amy, so then Amy will be printed. Then the next element was Bob, so Bob would be printed. Then the next element was Carlos, so Carlos would be printed. And it just goes on until the end of the array. After the array's elements are over, the for loop terminates. One important thing to remember when using this method, this second method that I just described here, is that you can only retrieve items from an array. You cannot add or modify anything. Actually, you can add, but you can't really modify. So, for example, over here, I could have said, if I is equal to 2 names, I equals blank. Now, I'm just making this up. But what I've done here is that I'm able to modify the 3rd element in the array names because I have the index. The statement that allows me that is actually changing or modifying an element in the array is this. And in order to write this statement, I need the index, which is I. But when you're doing this method, you don't have the index. And name is simply just a variable that holds the elements. It is in no way related to the actual array names. It's just an alias. It's a variable that holds an alias of the element that's in the array names. So this is really useful when you just want to print stuff in an array or when you just want to access the elements in an array and you don't want to necessarily change the original array. But if you want to make changes to an array, you have to use this method where you say for I in range length of the array. So if I go ahead and I actually run this, this will work in the same way. So I'm going to input the same names. So I'm going to input my name, Carlos, Amy, Mia, and Bob, then a 0, and it prints the same thing. So they work perfectly fine in this situation, but in other situations, you might have to make a choice as to which method to use. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot, and I'm gonna see you in my next video, but do remember to practice and not give up, because I know programming can be slightly difficult. It can seem taunting or it can seem scary, but it's not as hard as people make it out to be. So please do experiment and practice and have fun.